and I'm extremely pleased to say we have a Muslim in this country who is very much opposed to this Sharia supremacist political Islam agenda and has quite courageously stood up against it, both in connection with his organization, the American Islamic Forum on Democracy, which he co-founded and he's president of, and the Muslim Reform Movement, which he is also a co-founder. His name is Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, another distinguished veteran of the United States Navy in his case. He formerly served on the staff of the Capitol physicians staff. He is a medical doctor by training, but his avocation, I think it's fair to say, has been to speak for and to help ensure that there are alternatives to the kinds of claims being made by CAIR and the Islamic Society of North America and so many others of these Muslim Brotherhood fronts. And I'm thrilled to have him with us to talk a bit about why CAIR does not speak for Muslims like him, and I'm sure like countless millions of others in this country. Zuhdi Jasser, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, Frank.
Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. The floor is yours.
Thank you. It's an honor to be with you, and I just want to thank you for all that you do for our country and the patriots at the Center for Security Policy, both our long relationship with you, Frank, and with Fred Fleitz, and hats off to your board, and I know that you're all in the thick of it with us. And I'll tell you, just to let people know who we are, as you mentioned, I was born in the U.S. I'm the son of Syrian immigrants that escaped Ba'athist tyranny in Syria in the late 60s, and also a devout Muslim. I consider myself a conservative Muslim, Orthodox, if you will, but realized after 9/11 that we had two major problems. One was our core religious leadership needs displacement, if you will, because they're part of the 13th century interpretation of Islam that is theocratic, and so we haven't gone through a enlightenment for reform, if you will. And the second is that the majority of the groups that represent American Muslims in America are Islamists. So while the Council on American Islamic Relations, as they call themselves, as if America and Islam have two different identities and need a relationship by their name, but they represent Islamists, and Islamists are a theopolitical movement within Islam. And it really is offensive to me as an American Muslim when I see some of the nonsense that they put patriots like your chairman Prentice through. It's offensive to me to see that if he refuses to meet with them, that somehow that's an affront to Muslims. It might be an affront to Islamists, but as an American patriot, I think many people need to realize that when you meet with Islamists, you actually lift them up. And when we're a minority in America, which there's barely 4 million Muslims in America, when the media, when business leaders, when organizations meet with CAIR and legitimize them, they end up forcing our community into accepting them as our leaders. So they end up becoming the quasi de facto leaders. So when people refuse to meet with them, they say, you know what, the Muslim community can do better. And this is really what I think the leadership of your organization and so many others that refuse to kowtow to the Islamists at CAIR and say that somehow they're going to be the quasi de facto leaders of American Muslims. And bottom line is if you look at terrorism as a symptom, there's violent Islamists like Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Hezbollah, Hamas, etc., and there's nonviolent Islamists. So the groups like CAIR are the, if you will, the downstream nonviolent precursors of radical Islamists. So it does do us a lot of harm, and there's a reason our senator from Arizona, Senator Kyle, asked the FBI why CAIR should not be dealt with. And they responded, the assistant director of the FBI responded in writing and said that because they will not recognize Hamas as a terrorist group, because of X, Y, and Z, they cannot be met with formally by the U.S. government. And yet, if they are not met with, somehow it becomes an affront to Americanism. If legitimate business leaders who want to do interfaith work don't meet with them, I think, again, we Muslims can do better. And unfortunately, especially the left, end up kowtowing to victim mongers. And Let me tell you a little bit about CAIR and what their agenda is. Their agenda is threefold. One is a domestic operation, which is to monopolize American strategy, if you will, against jihadist threat, against Sharia supremacism, against the ideological struggle internally and globally, so that Americans are on the defense, so that they don't realize that the people controlling our community actually don't share any of the values, be it on the left or the right, of Americanism, of women's rights, of equality, free speech, anti-blasphemy laws, all these things that they turn a blind eye to and actually advocate for, most American Muslims reject. And yet, when they're propped up as representatives of American Muslims, it becomes as if we all want women to be in the back of the mosque behind the curtains, as if we all want to endorse countries' tyrannies like Turkey or Iran or Qatar, countries that they, so the second part of their plan and what they do is they work with our enemies abroad. So they'll turn a blind eye to the human rights abuses of Turkey, of Qatar, of Iran, and this is their foreign operations, if you will, which is, as we saw after Erdogan was elected, the imams that work closely with CAIR at the Islamic Society of North America were meeting with Erdogan on his election night. So this is not an organization that somehow is just domestically works locally in Connecticut doing great work for interfaith. No, they have global ties to groups that are countries working against our interests and actually fueling large terror organizations globally that are threatening our troops. Let me give you an example of what happens locally when you have Muslims like myself that can work with our leadership. Here in Arizona, there was a newspaper called The Muslim Voice that was founded by the founder of CAIR Arizona. Well, we exposed what they were saying in Arabic in 2006, and Marwan Ahmed at the time was then immediately, within a few months, removed from his position on the Human Relations Council. Why? Because we translated the Arabic that showed gross anti-Semitism, that said our troops were raping women and children in Iraq, that said that we were like the Mongols, and just horrible stuff that nobody knew he was actually a part of also, as he sat on this commission representing Muslims. So once the mayor saw this, he was actually a liberal, a Democrat. He removed him from the commission because we as Muslims said he should not be representing us. He's a radical. I don't care what organization, let alone the fact that he's representing CAIR. Fast forward to 2014. Another head of CAIR was speaking about our work here at a mosque in Scottsdale, at the mosque my family helped found. And he was saying that I somehow was an Islamophobe, and you'll see CAIR lists me as one of those so-called Islamophobes. And it's absurd. They say this in not only the United States, by the way, the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, in Saudi Arabia, in Yemen, and wherever they operate, says anyone who stands against them is somehow an anti-Muslim bigot, because they think we all should collectivize as one identity group, as one political group. And that's how they operate. And that's how they snuff out free speech and critical thinking. And I would ask folks, and whoever is giving oxygen to CAIR Connecticut and others that don't, that think that they somehow should be representing Muslims, I would ask them and say that, do you not realize that their goal is to suppress free speech? And if you really believe in diversity for American Muslims, is it really just racial or ethnic diversity? No, it should be ideological diversity. And as you mentioned, we helped co-found a Muslim reform movement that has a 2-page declaration, a declaration that calls for the principles that are really part of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. CAIR has rejected it. They said that they might agree with some of it, but they would not sign it. And I think it speaks to the fact that they don't share American values, that they're part of the Islamist group, just like the FBI said, do not deal with them because they won't condemn Hamas. They turn a blind eye to all the radicalism and misogyny and tyranny of Islamist entities around the world, domestically and abroad. And yet, when it comes to NATO countries, America and Israel, they want us to focus on victimization of their minority group, which is often exaggerated and done intentionally, Frank, to put America on the defense and put Americans on the defense. And they use terms like Islamophobia. Why? Because they don't want anybody to criticize Islam. I don't use that term because it implies that no one can criticize Islam. Yes, there might be some bigotry against Muslims that exists, but it's very different than calling it Islamophobia. And I would hope that the media and others that give them oxygen realize that they're using that term because they think that we can't criticize Islam, and we sure can, and that's part of Western modernity and freedom. So I would say that ultimately, people need to realize that CAIR is the bully in the room that represents the Islamist movement in the West, and they don't look at American Muslim interests for diversity. They reject our Muslim reform movement, and I think it's about time that bipartisan left and right start to realize that they need to be marginalized because they are the fringe of the fringe when it comes to Muslims. Yes, we Muslims have been silent. We need to get more, not only groups like me, but other reform movement leaders out there, and we're available. But the problem is that only the victim mongers are getting the microphone. And I think there's nothing more pro-Muslim than rejecting meeting with CAIR and recognizing that the Islamists not only don't share our values, but it is actually un-American to meet with them, or at least if you're going to meet with them, have other Muslims present so that we see that we're a diverse population and not just the fundamentalists that are part of what I would call the global red-green axis, as Jim and others have talked about before me and after me, which is you see not only domestically but globally the Islamists working with the extreme socialists and the extreme communists and the totalitarians of the left because they're collectivists. But even at the end of the day, that relationship will fall apart once they get into power, one of them. We saw that in Europe, where the Socialist Party actually abandoned Tariq Ramadan and others as they finally realized that they were theocrats who not only that shared none of their values. But in the UN and elsewhere, this is why the UN spends most of its time not on the human rights abuses of Assad or of Iran or of China. It spends its time on the human rights supposed exaggeration of what's happening in Israel or even in the West otherwise. So they are theocrats, they are Ikhwan or Muslim Brotherhood, and most Muslims can pick them out within a few minutes. But unfortunately, the media doesn't do their homework. The politically correct ambassadors of, I call them the bigots of low expectations. So they don't really hold Muslims accountable. They just want to meet with the hijabis that look like Muslims out superficially, but internally don't really encourage debate. So I would ask them, look up the American Islamic Forum for Democracy, look up Muslims for a Better Tomorrow out of Toronto, look up Ezra Nomani and Majid Nawaz. I mean, you'll see Majid Nawaz with the SPLC through a court, through a suit, ended up winning a significant amount of vindication because it proved that the SPLC, probably from CAIR's background work with them, had demonized a Muslim who loves his faith and said that he was somehow a bigot. And they quickly had to scrub the entire report because it actually proved that the SPLC is not anti-hate. They are actually a hate group that uses anti-hate as a cover. And I saw the same thing where I was named in one of their sister organizations, Hope Not Hate in London, that named me supposedly an anti-Muslim bigot. And also that report was removed and scrubbed from the internet. So thanks for the opportunity, and we look forward to continuing to work with CSP and would love to meet with your chairman and any business leaders that want to work with Muslims that share American values and are not part of a global Islamist network.
Dr. Jasser, thank you so much. This is such an important contribution to this discussion, and I think my colleagues unfortunately couldn't hear your very important remarks, but we'll of course all be going to the videotape afterwards. But just to capture the key point, I think, is you are a living proof that there are alternatives to this Sharia supremacist sort of agenda within the Muslim community. I believe you are much more representative of the vast majority of Americans than are the Islamists seeking to dominate them and to take down our country, take down our Constitution, take down those of us who are seeking to defend it. And you've introduced, importantly, the next speaker by talking a bit about the Council on American Islamic Relations Connecticut's demands, as we've been discussing here, demands that it be the interlocutor, it be the arbiter of whether Miles Prentice is allowed to have a baseball team in Norwich, Connecticut or not. And the price of his being able to do that has to be disassociating himself from the Center for Security Policy.